Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to teach you how to get abs. Everybody wants to have abs. I think it's a goal that kind of everyone has in the back of their mind, especially if you're into fitness and you care about how you look, you know, because when you have abs, it's a clear sign that you take care of yourself. You're someone who lifts, at least works out, and you eat somewhat good. You know, you're not overeating to a certain degree. But I want to talk about how you can achieve the V-Taper that'll make your mama want to inhale vapor.
What?
No, it's V-Taper. Anyway, everybody wants that V-Taper, right? And it's not something that's necessarily the easiest to achieve. But I want to give you guys 3 tips that are going to help you achieve that V-Taper if that's something that you'd like to see. You know, it's almost like a pathway down into your treasure, to the treasure that's in your pants that might be there. I don't know if you think that's a treasure or not. Whatever that might be. I want to give you guys 3 tips on that. There is some certain things that you need to keep in mind and some certain ways that you have to train in order to get that. And number 1, and it's not really going to help you necessarily, but you need to keep this in mind. Some people just have better genetics that allow them to have a better looking V-Taper or even just better abs in general. Now, I'm not trying to discourage you in any way or all. It really just comes down to the way that you're born and the way that your muscles insert. The muscles that create that V-Taper are your obliques, mostly your external obliques. And the external obliques attach to the ribs and make their way all the way down to your hip bone. So it's really about where the muscles insert at the hip bone. Some people have muscle insertions that sort of overlap over top of the bone. So even if that person doesn't work out and they're relatively lean just naturally, they're gonna have that V-Taper, right? Just because of the way that their muscles insert. Some people's insert directly at the hip bone, maybe a little underneath. I mean, you can think about other muscle parts, you know, it's almost like your biceps. Some people's biceps insert farther away from the actual elbow joint itself, making more of a round peak. Some people's biceps insert super close to the elbow, making their bicep look longer. Even though the overall muscle mass might be the same, the person who has the shorter muscle insertion is gonna look like they have a higher peak on their bicep just because of genetics. It's not something that you can train for. So the V-Taper on your abs is no different. I just wanted you to keep in mind that genetics play somewhat of a role in how your abs are actually going to look. The second most important thing, and this is much more important than even the training and what you should be doing to develop those external obliques, is your diet and just basically being lean enough. Because obviously if you're carrying a lot of body fat, you're not going to necessarily see any abs at all, right? The only way that you can see muscle separation in any part of your body is to make sure that your body fat levels are low enough so that you can actually see the muscle. Because you have to remember that the subcutaneous fat that is on the outside of your body covers, you know, it's between the skin and the muscle. So the fatter you are, the more body fat you have, the harder it is for you to see any muscle, right? So this is why when people are going through bulking phases, it's sometimes hard to tell if you're gaining muscle at all until you go through a phase of shedding that body fat off to actually reveal the physique that you've actually worked on. So make sure that you're in a caloric deficit so that way your body's forced to use body fat as an energy source, and make sure that you are eating somewhat of a healthy diet. If you are eating unhealthy and your carbohydrates are too high, and maybe your protein is a little bit low, that can cause a lot of water retention, and oftentimes that water retention can be right around your midsection. So sometimes it's not necessarily just body fat. A small tiny bit of that can also be water retention. Because I know for myself, I'm at a level where I can see abs every single day, but because I'm relevantly lean, I notice that water retention much more easily. So if I consumed alcohol the night before, the following day I might be really, really lean, and then I'll consume water throughout the day, and then the following day I find I'm actually retaining a lot of water and my abs kind of look a little bit soft. I'm not really seeing that sharp definition that I'd like to see, right? So water retention does also play a little bit of a role, but at the end of the day, tip number 2 is you gotta keep your diet dialed in and you gotta be lean. So even if your training is on point and you're doing all the right movements to work on that V-Taper, you're not gonna be able to see them if your body fat levels are too high. Number 3, of course, is the training. How do we train for this specifically? Like I said, we have to train the abdominals as a whole, but you really wanna select some exercises that are isolating the external obliques. So let's talk about the functions of the external obliques. Your external obliques are responsible for the rotation of the lower spine and the lateral flexion of the spine as well. But those are the two patterns that are gonna work your external obliques specifically. There are also some great compound exercises that are also great for developing external oblique and even just your core in general. Because you have to remember that whenever you're working your core, all of those muscles that are in the abdomen area are all working together, right? But it's really down to the specific motion or action that the trunk of your spine is moving in that allows each individual muscle to contract a little bit more or work a little bit harder. Exercises like barbell squats, overhead presses, and deadlifts require a lot of stabilization from these muscles to keep the spine nice and steady. So it's not just about doing, Russian twists or certain types of crunches to get that motion that you want to work the V-taper. It's also about resisting that motion as well. Those muscles help keep the trunk where it needs to be and preventing any lateral motions or rotations while you're doing your squats, deadlifts, and overhead presses. And of course, a plank is another like isometric hold that you can use to work your external obliques. Because obviously in a plank, you're trying not to rotate the body. You're trying not to bend in any sort of way. You're just holding it. So oftentimes, a lot of lifters who are focused on strength with those main compound lifts that everyone's obsessed with, they will have great development in their external obliques. So some of my favorite exercises that you can perform to work your external obliques and isolate them a little bit would be a cable chop. That way you're rotating the spine from side to side. You could also do a medicine ball toss if you've got medicine balls and you don't have a cable, or you just want to switch it up. You could also do a farmer's carry on one side. So in that case, it's a suitcase carry. So if you hold a heavy dumbbell and just go for a walk, that external oblique has to resist on the opposite side to prevent any lateral motion, right? You're trying to keep the spine stationary as you're moving forward. There's also various forms of planks like the T-plank or the hip dip plank. Another great functional movement is a lateral kettlebell swing when you're swinging the kettlebell on each side of the hip. You can also do a direct side plank where you're holding your elbow on just one side of the body and holding that. But at the end of the day, it's all about rotating the trunk, creating some resistance in that area and moving laterally as well, and making sure that you're bending and putting those external obliques to work. Of course, a lot of people get worried about getting too bulky in the midsection, which that may happen, but I don't really think it's a concern, right? It's actually quite hard to develop really thick abs. Your ab muscles really don't respond to training the way that the rest of the body does. I think really if you just focus on strengthening your core and getting your core to a point where it benefits all of the other movements and exercises that you do and benefits your everyday well-being, your abs will reflect the way that you train, right? So you don't necessarily have to do a bunch of these movements that I listed, but they are important if you are someone who isn't necessarily genetically gifted. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully I can get a video out next week, but make sure you subscribe, give this video a like, and I'll see you guys next week.